Marie Antoinette. I did not do it on purpose. Queen of France, born Vienna, Austria, November 2nd, 1755. Died Paris, France, October 16th, 1793. 37 years old. Maria Antonia of Austria was royalty to the 10th power. On her list of dead relatives were the likes of Roman emperors and Mary, Queen of Scots. She was trained in regal attitude and poise, and not to have anything on her mind, because all she had to do was look good and have babies. Like her 10 sisters, Maria Antonia was predestined to marry royalty in some far-off country to keep the Habsburg dynasty alive. She was a player in the diplomatic strategy of don't kill us, we're the in-laws. Maria Antonia ended up with the gig of a lifetime, the Queen of France. Her baby-making lineage was what the French wanted, until all they wanted was her head. When she was 14, old enough to have babies, Maria Antonia was put in a carriage and carted off to France, where she married the 15-year-old king in training, Louis XVI. When her carriage arrived at the French border, she got an extreme makeover. Her Austrian things were dumped, including all her clothes, her pug dog, Mops, and even her name, as she was transformed into the French Marie Antoinette. Louis XVI was no Prince Charming, but she still got to live at Versailles Palace with a personal staff of 500. The only thing the staff couldn't do for her was make a baby. But Marie Antoinette was the boss of her own body, and she wasn't ready to be a mommy. Instead, she threw big parties, shopped for shoes, gambled, and got ridiculous 3-foot-high hairdos. The king did metalwork and hunted, but not for her. Her mother warned the 15-year-old newlywed that she should get pregnant fast because her looks were already going. Meanwhile, the French people were out of work and starving, and they were starting to hate their queen's guts. It was 7 years and 3 months before the marriage was consummated. They had 4 children, but 2 died in childbirth. The French Revolution, which began in 1789, destroyed the monarchy. The next king had been born, but the people didn't want kings anymore. They wanted to be free and equal, and they were killing people left and right to get that freedom. Marie Antoinette and her family were captured and taken as hostages, which was actually better than being on the streets, because the angry mob would have torn them limb from limb. Soon after, in 1793, her husband, King Louis XVI, was beheaded on the guillotine. The guillotine was the new humane decapitating machine. Before, they used an axe and a block. The designer, Dr. Guillotine, said, the mechanism falls like lightning. The head flies off, the blood spurts. So much blood spurted, the streets were slippery with it. You won't even feel the slightest pain, Dr. Guillotine proclaimed. But sometimes a severed head would blink or open its mouth to bite whatever was near. Marie Antoinette's 2 remaining children were taken away. She was devastated. She was thrown into prison even though she was visibly ill. Her hair had turned white. Her joints were swollen and achy. To make matters worse, she fainted a lot and had convulsions. She was also showing signs of cancer in the womb. 2 women jailers felt sorry for her and got her lace, linens, and better food. They brought her flowers, put a ribbon in her hair every day, and gave her mineral water instead of the filthy water of the Seine. But then the women were arrested for treating Marie Antoinette like she was a queen or something. The next jailer was all business. When Marie Antoinette asked for knitting needles to make socks for her children, who she knew must be cold wherever they were, the request was denied because the pointy needles might be used as weapons. Instead, she pulled out threads from the fabric on the walls and wove them into garters to hold up stockings. When she was brought to trial, the courtroom was packed with people jeering. The only thing still queenly about her was her calm poise in front of the murderous crowd. She was put in a chair up on a platform so everybody could watch her in her misery. Her lawyer was given only 1 day to prepare her case, but it didn't really matter. Her fate had already been decided. Marie Antoinette's death would be the communal violence that was needed to bring everyone together. Every problem France had ever had was blamed on Marie Antoinette, and she wasn't even French. On the day after her execution, she wore a on the day of her execution, she wore a white dress, black stockings, held in place by her homemade garters, and purple shoes with 2-inch heels from the good old days. They cut her hair, tied her hands behind her back, and sat her in an open cart pulled by horses. She was carted around for over an hour to pump the crowd into a frenzy. In those shoes, she climbed the scaffold, calm and in control. Then her head was cut off. Marie Antoinette died on October 16th, 1793, in Paris. She was only 37 years old. Her body and head were taken to a nearby graveyard and tossed on the grass while the gravediggers took their lunch break, giving Madame Tussaud, the famous wax modeler, time to sculpt her face in wax before she was put in the ground. Her death didn't end anything. It was only the beginning of the Reign of Terror. 20 to 40,000 people, mostly royalty and wealthy citizens, were killed in the next 2 years. By 1815, kings were briefly back in power and Marie Antoinette's body was dug up. The 2 hand-sewn garters that she wore at her execution identified her. She was reburied along with her husband in the Basilica of St. Denis. There are no descendants of Marie Antoinette. Her son escaped the guillotine, but died in prison 2 years later of tuberculosis at age 10. Her daughter was freed at 17 and married off, but died childless at 72. Moments before the executioner cut off Marie Antoinette's head, she accidentally stepped on his foot. She looked at him and said, "I did not do it on purpose." Those were her last words, and that was the story of her life.